over to another video by Liminal Spaces. So, we're back to Star Trek. Strange New Worlds. This is Season 2, Episode 3, I believe. And it's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which of course is a Shakespeare quote from Macbeth. Macbeth says, "Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all of our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death." I don't think this episode sums that up in any way, right? I think that they just pick these titles because they sound dramatic. Yeah, that's a very brilliantly written, disturbing, sad quote about the fact that time cannot pass fast enough. It just keeps going and going and going. But this is a time travel episode, which I do, just to be totally honest, I don't like time travel episodes. Because all they do is kill everybody off, and then they wake up back in their own time, and nobody remembers anything, and it didn't matter in any way at all. It's basically like fan fiction, right? It really has nothing to do with what we're watching. But that being said, this one was kind of okay. It's not too bad. I'm going to be happy to talk about it. It was pretty good. Mostly because, of course, I really like the characters. So the opening of this is just great. It's got this whole... This is the episode where La'an, the head of security, goes back in time with Kirk to Canada, to Vancouver, I think is where they are, and they need to fix something that's going to happen there in order to save her timeline. And the opening is great because you just get to see her doing her day-to-day stuff and how it's kind of weighing on her to always be the bad guy, right? There's literally a scene where she has to go tell Spock to keep it down because he's getting noise complaints with his musical instrument, right? Which is pretty funny. And of course he asks, who complained? And she says, it was anonymous, right? So it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. They, of course, time travel. I'm not going to go over all the details of the episode because hopefully you've seen it. But they have to steal clothes. And they do this weird thing where she slips an item into a total stranger's bag so that they get busted for shoplifting so that these two can shoplift and get out of there. And I feel like that is not good. I feel like that was a really poor choice because it's not very Starfleet, you know. I do understand that they need clothes, I guess. I understand that they need clothes. I mean, they have clothes. And he, after they steal the clothes, Kirk realizes that he needs money and he can actually get money by hustling chess players in the park, I guess, is where they are. They're on the river, and I don't know anything about the river or anything, but they're there on the river. There's people playing chess. I assume that's a normal thing. And he just bets them money and wins all their money because he's good at chess, which is a little bit strange. I guess one thing I should point out is this is not the Kirk we know. She's walking down the hall, and there's a person who just appears in front of her, and he's been shot. He's bleeding all over, and he says, "You got to fix the past," or whatever, and he hands her this little device, and he dies. And when he dies, the timeline completely changes. What he says is, "You've got to get to the bridge." So she runs up to the bridge, and she's like, "Captain, we have a problem," and Kirk turns around, not Pike. Right? She's on a completely different bridge. She recognizes a lot of the people, but not everybody. And Kirk is there instead of Pike. So a lot has changed. And as we go through the episode, Kirk explains that he's never been on Earth. There's been constant war. Earth, the reason he's not been on Earth is because it's basically been destroyed. He has lived through constant war, and it opens with him telling Spock, he doesn't know Spock at all. Spock is come on to the ship screen and is basically begging him for help before they get destroyed. And Kirk's like, I'm sorry, we can't help you. We can't afford to fight a war on two fronts. If we help you, then those guys will become our enemy. The answer is no. And he leaves Spock to die. Like, this is a war-torn person, but they don't really change him at all. He does explain that he used to play chess with his first officer, but his first officer's just not good at it. So it's just not fun. Which I guess is just kind of a little thing about how if Spock was his first officer, then he would have played a lot more chess. And yet he's here beating all these people at chess. So I don't know. It felt a tiny bit weird that he was able to make a ton of money, and they probably got this other person arrested while they were stealing clothes. Here he is making bank, and I don't know. The whole sequence was a little bit weird. And he's clearly not war hardened in any way. He's the same exact character. Like, they didn't do anything physically, which I'm okay with, right? You don't need a big old scar or a goatee or something, right? It's okay that he looks the same, but at the same time, he needs to be a different person. And I don't think they could get away with that because they also wanted this to be a love story that they felt could travel through to the other universe. So they decided to sacrifice that, which is all just kind of a mess. It's not great. There is a really neat part where she starts talking about middle names and last names, and he brings up his brother, Sam, Sam is actually his middle name, and she says nobody calls him that, and he says Sam's alive, which I thought was excellent. That kind of stuff I feel like they could have really brought through, especially if they're not going to change the way he looks, because we're going to see him and think it's the same person, but then as we learn things, they can really be shocking to us, you know. And I feel like we could have learned a lot more really interesting things about, you know, people that he's had to kill, and I don't want to mire down in all that stuff, but it's so opposite, you know, to find out that Sam is dead already. We know he's going to die in the future, right? But to find out that he's dead already was just this weird shock. And to see on his face the joy of hearing that his brother might be alive was just awesome. And it could work that way throughout. There's a point where he buys hot dogs, and it's like he grew up with hot dogs, but then he couldn't have hot dogs anymore because a war started. But then he got another hot dog, and he's like, ooh, these hot dogs are so good, you should never pass up a good hot dog. Instead of it being like, okay, we need sustenance, right? We need food. So they go to this little stand. She's like, let's go to this little stand. They sell food here. And he's like, okay, wow, it smells good. And he takes a bite. And his whole world should have changed because he ate good food, right? Like, I feel like they could have really gone crazy with this idea of a person who's grown up in this incredibly rough, sheltered, terrible existence, seeing something else. Because he is zapped to the past. He's never seen a sunset. They bring that up. And that's kind of nice. It's okay. But it's also muddied with his normal responses to everything else. Right? He doesn't know how a swinging door works. But I think they wanted it to be a gag. And once again, this guy's not Kirk. Right? You can't just throw him gags. because he can't get out of the door. He keeps going around. And she's like, you don't know how to use a door? And he's like, I've never been on Earth. But it has that kind of weird, not funniness, that kind of serious, like, oh, wow, he's never been on Earth. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It was a muddy situation. But they end up stealing a car. Kirk steals the car, and he's excited about it. You can tell that he likes the idea of piloting this vehicle, but he's horrible at it for a minute. So he like can't find forward, and he keeps backing up, and I think he's hitting the car behind him. But then later he's driving like a some stunt guy who's been doing it for years. So that was a little bit iffy and weird. It's fun, It's fun to see him in the sports car. It's fun to see him whipping around as he slams on the brakes and they spin around and then he takes off again. And they do all kinds of neat stuff, but I don't know how well it fit with everything. In order to steal the car, he actually gives a guy a Vulcan neck pinch. And she's like, where did you learn how to do that? And he explains that he was in prison. He literally went to prison for a time. And his cellmate was a Vulcan. And his cellmate taught him how to do it. Which is cool. That is the kind of surprises that I wanted to see. Although that was a little bit muddy too. Because it's cold where they are. They're way up north. And this guy's got this huge parka on. Right? This huge puffy coat. And he gives him the Vulcan nut pinch. He just goes down. And I'm like, through the coat? He got him through the coat. Which I don't want to say that would be impossible. Because that's dumb, right? But at the same time, I don't know. That it just, all these little tiny things just kind of stick with you, They pull you out a little bit. And then the cop thing. So, the cop thing, I don't know. I've only spent like a month in Canada. I'm not some huge Canada expert. But there's a point where they get pulled over. And the cops are going to arrest Kirk. And this woman appears who's got a phone and she's filming them. And she's like, did you have your cameras on when you arrested this guy, when you pulled this guy over? And are you just pulling him over because he's a rights activist and you don't want rights activists to be free? Like, she goes into this whole monologue and the cops just leave. Now, in Chicago, and I know it's a different world, right? I get that, but I was on the platform and there was 2 cops with dogs. And a person was like, oh my God, those dogs are so cute. And they pulled up their phone and started filming the dogs. And the cop yelled, do you have a permit to film in the city of Chicago? And I don't know legally how legit that question actually is, because they're not making a movie, right? But that cop knew how to maybe intimidate someone to turning their camera off, because he just came walking towards them demanding a response from this, and the person just stopped filming. Chicago cops do not screw around. And if a Chicago cop is arresting someone and you try to intimidate them into not arresting the person, you're probably going to get shot. Right? I mean, I don't know. That really, like, this is an American show. I think I can say that. It's an American television production. I know they film in Canada from time to time, of course. But this is an American show with an American audience, mostly American audience. And it's really global, which I really love. Okay, I want to throw that out there. I'm not saying it's only for Americans, because that's completely false. I want it to be everywhere. right? But that I don't know, and maybe it's a Canadian thing. I don't know, but that was just out there. Like that is not a thing, not a thing. But it works in this case. They get free. Um, yeah, really bizarre. They talk about how aliens are causing problems on Earth in order to slow down our progress. And I felt that that was really interesting because it simply reminded me of Three Body Problem, honestly. That's going to come out soon, and we're gonna have to do a video on it. We're going to do another video probably on the books. We'll do that, and then a video on the television show. I'm worried about the television show, to be honest, because it's the Game of Thrones people. But we'll see. Who knows? Who knows? That I thought that that was really cool. I thought that that was smart. I don't know if they got it from Three Body Problem. They could have, but it was neat. It was neat to see that. And I shouldn't even suggest that because Three Body Problem probably didn't create it, right? That's just the first time I really kind of heard about it. And I enjoyed that. I like the idea of saying we need to slow these humans down because in Three Body Problem, because they're trying to get here. It's going to take them 4 years to get here. And at the rate we're advancing, we might be able to fight them off when they arrive. But if they slow our ability to advance, we don't stand a chance when they get here. So it's really neat. It's really well thought out and done. And this is kind of cool. It's cool that it happened here as well. There's a really fun scene where the romance is great. The heart is great, as always. It's through the roof in this episode. It's wonderful to see it. It's really great. And the romance really kind of shines. These two actors are great with this kind of stuff. You know, it's not like comedy or whatever. They're playing romance, which is more their type. And there's a fun part where they have this little watch, which is going to show them where the bad guys are or where the base is. And he wants to wear the watch, right? But she's wearing the watch. They're both very competitive people. You know, she's head of security. He's the captain of a starship. And they're trying to boss each other around. And she's like, you just want to wear the watch because you want to be in charge, you know? And it's a very fun kind of playing the opposite scene where they're sort of fighting, but at the same time, you can tell they really like each other. And then they end up kissing, of course, and the watch goes off, but she doesn't notice, even though she promised she would tell him. She doesn't notice because they're kissing. And then he sees that the watch has gone off, and he says, you lied to me, right? Because she didn't tell him when the watch went off. You didn't keep your promise, I think he says. So it's cool. It's a fun moment. And that brings me up to there's a coincidence in this, which I always kind of have trouble with. And this one, they really stretched out. Like, you've got the chief, the engineer. And, of course, it's Carol Kane now. And she, in the beginning of the episode, is explaining that she used to live in Vermont, I think. And that she didn't steal any of her stuff. She had it since she was in Vermont because she had an antique shop in Vermont. So that's why she has all these antiques. So then they need an engineer, and she remembers that this engineer lived in Vermont with an antique shop. So from Canada, and I don't think they have the internet at this time. I'm not positive. I could be wrong. I can't remember what date they went back to. I thought it was like 94 or something, but I could be totally wrong. It could be today. But they look up all the antique shops in Vermont, and they end up finding her. They travel from Canada to Vermont. They find her, and they ask her to help him detect these bad guys, detect this power source. And the only kind of saving grace of all this craziness is that she is not an engineer yet. She has not gone to engineering school. So she's like, how in the world would I help you? If you want an engineer, why would you look for me? Which is nice. I like if there's going to be something that seems like too much coincidence, it's nice when it gets shot down. The trouble is, of course, she does end up helping them. She has that little goofy watch that will detect when they're close to something. So that was pretty extreme, kind of a big coincidence for me. But the watch moments were really nice between the two actors, so that was cool. One really neat thing is the person who gets the cops off of them when she was filming him with the phone turns out to be the bad guy. And I never saw that coming. That was awesome. I don't feel like they telegraphed that in any way. I think it's because they were so far into the episode before we met her. Because normally you meet the new characters right in the beginning of the episode. Like literally, they'll be standing in the transporter room saying, well, we have the new delegates arriving today. I hope it goes well. Right, and here's the delegates. But they didn't do that in this. They really pushed off that character to way into the episode, and I think it really helped disguise her as not the bad guy, even though she is the bad guy. So that was cool. So this episode does a really neat thing where Laan Noonien Singh gets to meet Khan. And she meets Khan as a young child. And her life has been so affected by Khan that you would imagine that she might just kill him if she ever were to meet him in the past. She might kill him, right? Especially because of all the wars he caused, all the death he caused. You know, Khan is not a good guy. But when she meets him, he's a little kid. And she kind of realizes that her world, Starfleet, none of that would exist without Khan. And that doesn't justify the things that Khan did, but if she wants to live in her world and have Starfleet and have the wonderful future that we have to learn. And the only way we can learn is by experiencing. And Khan gave us experiences. You know, the genetics war was horrible. And because it was so bad, we were able to grow and change and become part of the universe. And if we didn't have that, we would probably still be fighting wars. Kirk is still fighting wars in his world. And he doesn't know who Khan is, you know. So she realizes that Khan needs to exist for our world to exist. And it also helps her on a personal level because she realizes that she doesn't need to be ruled by Khan and his past. She can be her own person and make her own decisions, which is really nice as well. So that was cool. Lots of heart. Like I said, lots of heart in this. But it was really neat to see Khan and to see her meet Khan. That was cool. And also, while that's occurring, the bad guy ends up getting shot. And she has... You know how in World War II movies or spy stuff mostly, in spy stuff, if a bad spy is about to die, they have something in their tooth maybe that they can bite down on. No, if they're about to get captured, they can kill themselves. They bite down on their tooth, it poisons them, and they die. That way they'll never give away any secrets, right? This episode has something kind of like that where the bad guy gets shot and she doesn't want her body to be captured so that everybody realizes she's an alien. So she has a special thing that she can trigger right before she dies that makes her disintegrate. So she gets shot and she's dying and she chooses to disintegrate herself. It's an interesting, weird, kind of cool scene. Yeah, it was well done. I enjoyed it. And then I just had one. So everything gets fixed, right? Khan lives, everything gets fixed, and the bad guy's destroyed. So she gets zapped back to her time. But she meets a person from, kind of a Doctor Who thing, right? You've got these Time Lords that take care of time, um, and they're actually part of Starfleet. They're just from the future of Starfleet, so they have more technology. And this person, this time boss, this time cop, is very cold, which I thought was pretty cool. She's like, yep, I need my thing back. Thank you. Good job. Bye. Don't tell anybody. Bye. You know, it's this weird kind of cold thing that happens, which I sort of liked. I like bold choices. I like interesting things, and that scene is pretty interesting. So she realizes she can't tell anybody. So she's just stuck with knowing that her and Kirk fell in love, but that's not her Kirk, right? She literally calls Kirk from her time, and she's like, hey. He's like, hey, do I know you? And she's like, no, I just wanted to call to get some information about Sam because I'm the head of security on the ship that Sam is on. He's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll give you anything you need. And the next time I'm on the ship, we'll have drinks together and I'll tell you lots of good stuff about Sam, which is very Kirk, right? He's kind of flirting with her. You find out in later episodes that that's not going to work out, but that's not part of this. So, yeah, he's kind of flirty with her, and it's interesting. But she doesn't. I don't think she sees the Kirk that she knew in this Kirk. At least by the way the story goes and by her reaction, even though they didn't go far enough, in my opinion, with making them two separate people. Right? I'm not sure about any of that. But my thought was, the freaky thing was, she goes up to the bridge and the engineer is there. And she lets the engineer off the hook for all the stolen stuff. She's like, I think we shouldn't worry about it. And the captain's like, okay, fine. Because the engineer helped her, of course. But she killed the bad guy after she met the engineer. So if the bad guy is the problem and the death of Khan would change everything, then does the engineer remember meeting her? And that was the question that I have, which they just glazed over. They didn't even bother to mention it. And they don't bring it up again in the whole season. So I feel like the engineer doesn't remember, but I feel like the engineer should remember. But maybe it's explained in the little time device. I don't know. It's weird. That stuck out a little bit to me, is should the engineer remember. Okay, this was a fun episode. I did like it, even though I do not like time travel episodes. When Kirk gets killed, it's like, yeah, whatever, because he's still alive. Everything's fine. But they did kind of a neat thing where she does remember. So she is kind of stuck with the weight of everything that she's been through. And the hope with Kirk, being here. So it's interesting, but it wasn't great, right? So for our 4 categories, I feel like the heart is through the roof. As always, heart's a 10 in this. Heart is a 10. It's their focus and they're nailing it. So that's great. The science, I don't know. It was so muddy with the time travel and Kirk being able to drive but not being able to drive, and meeting up with this engineer because they know what state she lives in. Like, I don't know. For science, I'm probably going to go like a 5 on this. It was not great. The philosophy, I'd probably go higher. I'd probably go a 7. Because it's neat to say that she knows Kirk, but she doesn't know him at all. She knows a different Kirk. And it's interesting to sort of think about, if they got together, would she ever tell him? That's interesting because if she tells him, it might hurt the timeline. At least that's what the time boss sort of warned her about. You can't tell anyone because if you do, you will change things. So that's interesting. So I think there's a little bit of philosophy there, a little bit of time philosophy, love philosophy. Is it the same person? I don't know. Um, so yeah, I'd give it like a seven. I think it raised some questions. Um, as for mystery and awe of space, there wasn't any. He does talk a little bit about Earth being destroyed, but it's all so common, and they're on Earth. Like there's no exploration happening at all. It's just them talking about their different futures, kind of. So I'd probably just give that a five as well. So overall, that's like a 27 out of 40. It's not great. Overall, I think I'd probably give this episode like a six or a seven. I like the character, so I enjoyed watching that character go through this adventure. I think that all of them kind of need their own adventures, and I think for the most part they've got them, except for the pilot. The pilot, we just don't get enough. Straight up, we do not get enough of that pilot. We need more. I was talking with my brother, and he's like, "Why do you always forget that character's name?" And I'm slowly beginning to realize it's because we don't have much of a connection to that character. We just don't see them enough. She needs an episode like this episode, something that we can really get to know her with. But it was good. I liked it. I'd probably give it like a seven, maybe a six, like I said. But overall, it was fine. It's just that it's time travel. That's the biggest knock against it, to be honest. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, click the like button. And if you want more of this, we got a ton. So definitely subscribe because there's a ton more coming as well. I got to get through this, right? And have a great day.